Tonight, a 360 special report, the Sissy Boy experiment uncovering the truth. Now, over the next 3 nights, we're going to show you what happened to a little boy who got enrolled in a government-funded study aimed at making effeminate boys more masculine. He was just 5 years old at the time, and decades later, the research that was done on this boy is still being cited by those who think kids can be prevented from becoming gay. The story begins in the early 1970s when the little boy was treated at UCLA's gender identity clinic under a pseudonym. His real name was concealed. His treatment at the time was called a success, and still many people consider that it was. But now, more than 30 years later, we finally know what really happened to this little boy. His name is Kirk Murphy, and for the first time on television, his family is sharing his story, their story, with us. And they're doing it because they want you to know who Kirk really was. They want you to know what he went through, and they want you to know what impact they say it had on the rest of his life.
This is my brother, Kirk Andrew Murphy, right here. This is what he was supposed to be. Right here.
This is the last time Mark Murphy remembers his brother Kirk as a happy child. The photo was taken when Kirk was 4, a year before he was placed in experimental therapy at UCLA to treat what doctors identified as exaggerated feminine behavior.
It left Kirk just totally stricken with the belief that he was broken, that he was different from everybody else.
Kirk's sister Maris and brother Mark say Kirk was never the same after therapy.
The only thing they did was destroy our brother. I mean, they took him away from us. He was empty, nothing there.
In 1970, Kirk Murphy was a smart, outgoing 5-year-old growing up near Los Angeles. His mother, KT Murphy, however, was worried about him.
Well, I was becoming a little concerned about playing with the girls' toys and stroking the hair, you know, the long hair and stuff. I was seeing effeminate mannerisms that bothered me because I wanted Kirk to grow up and have a normal life.
Mrs. Murphy says she saw psychologists on a local TV program talking about behavior like Kirk's.
He was naming all these things. If your son is doing 5 of these 10 things, does he prefer to play with girls' toys instead of boys' toys?
The psychologist was recruiting young boys for a government-funded program at UCLA, part of which was designed to reverse perceived feminine behavior, what one doctor involved with the program later called Sissy Boy Syndrome.
Him being the expert, I thought, well, maybe I should go ahead and take Kirk in. In other words, nip it in the bud.
For nearly a year, Kirk was treated at UCLA, mainly by a man named George Rekers. Rekers was a doctoral student at the time, but went on to become a founding member of the Family Research Council, which lobbies against gay marriage, adoption, and laws that seek to protect the rights of gays and lesbians. Rekers has also been a prominent proponent of the belief homosexuality can be prevented. To treat Kirk's so-called sissy behavior, he was repeatedly placed in a room with 2 tables. He was observed through a one-way window. He was given toys to play with and could choose between traditionally masculine ones like plastic knives and guns or feminine toys like dolls and a play crib. He could also choose clothing to wear, an army hat and military fatigues, or a girl's dress, jewelry, and a wig. Kirk's mother would be brought into the room and told to ignore him when he played with feminine toys or clothes and compliment him when he played with masculine ones. In a case study he wrote, George Rekers noted that when Kirk's mother ignored him, he would beg for attention from her, crying, even throwing tantrums. But Mrs. Murphy was told to continue to ignore him.
And in this particular incident, they write that he becomes so upset, he's just beside himself, that they actually had to remove him from the room. And after they remove him from the room, they come in and tell my mom that it's working, and then they bring him back in and start all over.
Having read this report, I keep coming back to the word experimenting.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, because it doesn't seem like this is not some proven treatment. This is experimenting. The experimental therapy even continued outside UCLA. In Kirk's home, his parents were told to use poker chips as a system of reward and punishment to make Kirk act more masculine. Do you remember these chips?
Yes, I do. Oh, yes, I do.
Were you awarded them as well? Were you part of this?
Yes, I was. My parents added me to it just so they could reinforce to my brother that, you know, Big Brother's doing it too, so everything's okay.
These are the actual chips?
Those are
The actual real chips.
So blue chips were for masculine behavior?
Yes.
And the red chips were penalty
Yes.
for feminine behavior?
Yes.
So if Kirk played with one of your dolls, he would get a red chip?
Yes.
According to George Rekers' case study, the red chips resulted in physical punishment by spanking from the father. Do you remember the beating?
Oh, yes, sir, I do. Many times did I move the stacks around.
How do you mean?
I took some of the red chips and put them on my side. I didn't see the beatings, and it was just like, you know.
You would take Kirk's red chips.
Yes, sir.
The things he had been given for feminine behavior, you would
Yes.
take them yourself so that he wouldn't get beaten.
We would come home from school, and it turned into, that's the first thing that you did when you walked through the door, is you looked and what was the chip count today? What happened? What changed? How bad is it going to be? And it was always bad. The whipping every Friday night.
I do remember one time he spanked him so hard that he had welts up and down his back and on his buttocks. And I remember Mark saying, cry harder and he won't hit so hard. Today it would be abuse.
According to Kirk's brother and sister, his outgoing personality changed, and he began to behave in the way he knew his parents and George Rekers wanted him to. His family says the impact of the experimental therapy lasted his entire life.
He had no idea how to relate to people. It's like somebody just walked up and turned his light switch off, and we got what we wanted, and we'll see you later.
He actually ate his lunch in the boys' bathroom for 3 years, where he didn't have to put himself out there, even just to have a friend.
In his case study of the UCLA experiment, George Rekers called Kirk Craig to protect his identity. He considered his work with Kirk a success, writing, Craig's feminine behavior was gone, and claiming Kirk became indistinguishable from any other boy. In numerous other published reports and studies over his nearly 3-decade career since, George Rekers has continued to write positively about Kirk's treatment, using it as proof homosexuality can be prevented. Kirk's family has only recently discovered Rekers' writings, and they're outraged. They say Kirk was gay, but because of the treatment he was subjected to as a child, struggled with his attraction to men his whole life.
He acknowledged himself as a gay man 1985 on. He never had a committed, loving relationship because he wouldn't allow himself to.
Unable or unwilling to have a committed relationship with a man, Kirk focused on his work and chose a career where being openly gay wasn't even possible. He spent 8 years in the U.S. Air Force and then held a high-profile position with an American finance company in India.
Kirk, what do you think of your nephew?
He's good. Go around the camera.
Yeah.
Just taking pictures.
This visit home in June of 2003 was the last time Kirk's family saw him alive. Nearly 6 months later, he took his own life, hanging himself from a fan in his apartment in New Delhi. Kirk Murphy was 38 years old.
I used to spend so much time thinking, why would he kill himself at the age of 38? It doesn't make any sense to me. What I now think is, I don't know how he made it that long.
Well, tomorrow night, part 2 of our investigation. How does George Rekers now respond to the family's allegation that his therapy led to Kirk's suicide? We tracked him down in Florida to find out. That is tomorrow night on the program.